Well, welcome to Everything PC, the technology show for PC enthusiasts, brought to you by Tech Central. My name is Duncan McLeod. I'm joined, as always, by my collaborator in this venture, Gerard Pretorius. Gerard, good to see you again.
Yeah, hello.
Who are these people with us?
Oh, we have foreign invaders.
No, we won't call them that. These are actually our sponsors, Microsoft and HP. Guys, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you for sponsoring the show. We really appreciate it. Right next to me is Colin Erasmus, who is now Chief Operating Officer at Microsoft South Africa. How long have you been in that role?
About 2 months, sir. That's why I have grey hair.
Well, congrats on the promotion.
Thank you very much.
And next to Colin is Yesh. I'm probably going to butcher this name after I said it perfectly before we started. Yesh Surjoodeen.
Perfectly fine. How are you doing, Duncan?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
MD of Hewlett Packard,
HP
or HP South Africa. It's
Africa?
no longer Hewlett Packard, right?
No, it isn't.
Just
yeah,
HP.
It's just HP. HP
Just
South
HP.
Africa.
Much easier.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Easier.
Yeah.
So Yesh, welcome to our
Thanks.
studio, and welcome to Everything PC.
Pleasure to
It's
be here.
fantastic to have you guys in the studio. Beyond the two of us, who normally just talk
Yes.
rubbish all day.
Well,
We'll actually get some real insights from industry leaders now. So, I thought let's start, Colin, with you, and let's talk a bit about Windows 11, because that's in the news at the moment, because 22H2 has just been released. Some people have started to get it through Windows Update. Others, like me and like Gerard, have forced the updates because we just got to have it. It's the latest version. We've got to have it right now. We're probably your favorite type of user, actually. But tell us a bit about Windows 11. It's been on the market for about a year now, right?
Correct, yeah.
22H2 has just been released. How's market reception here in South Africa been?
Look, it's been incredible, I think, over the last year, and obviously the updates that we're seeing at the moment. There have been some interesting key updates. I would say, the numbers that we can absolutely share is that we're seeing, at the same time with Windows 10, we're seeing about twice the uptake from where we were with Windows 10. So people are really loving what they have. And I think, we'll get a bit into it later around hybrid work, but I think that is really spurred on a lot of the uptake from what we've seen, because it really is and has been the operating system built for this hybrid work.
Yeah.
Where the endpoint really becomes the endpoint now. There's been some interesting updates, mostly in 4 major areas. We can't talk about Windows 11 without talking about security. It is the most secure OS we've ever built, designed out the box. We talk about security from chip to cloud. So we want to make sure that when somebody boots that PC, that we are secure from boot all the way through to the cloud. So there have been some interesting security updates that we've done. Some updates to the Defender product, so the smart screen product, really helping people. If you look at the cyber environment today, scary place to be. So some very interesting updates made that we are checking and prompting people when they may be potentially putting in credentials where they shouldn't be putting in credentials. So updates made there. And updates made from an app control point of view as well. So security, major update, we'll always be doing security updates. We've also made it easier for the general user out there. So something that we saw, and one of the big design principles with Windows 11 was the simplification, right? So some people were, start menu in the middle, not sure about this. But as we've spoken to more and more people, that was actually designed to be simplistic and to be a productivity boost, because we're now in the middle, we can get things easier. But some interesting changes we made there. We actually made some changes around captioning. Accessibility is really big for us. We want to make sure that people that have accessibility challenge really can use the product. So some interesting changes that we made there with the latest updates around narrator voices being more natural, easier to listen to, so if you can be doing longer things. And then things like system-wide captioning that we now do. So a lot of the applications had to be very specific with Windows 11 to the captioning. We've now done that system-wide. Yeah. So any audio that you really get from any application Windows 11 can now do that captioning. So that's quite interesting. A big one for us has always been the accessibility and embracing our developer audience. Again, big audience for us. So some interesting changes made around the App Store. And now allowing third parties to front their apps in the App Store as well. So that's quite a big one for us. And then productivity is always, and we talk about hybrid work, we talk about productivity, and we're going to get into that in a second because some very interesting research we've just released. But we've done some interesting stuff around giving people do not disturb spaces within Windows 11 now, and actually giving them focus time sessions within Windows 11 and making some changes to the snap screens that we launched at the time we launched. Took some feedback around that and made some changes there. So those are mostly just the high-level changes. The adoption globally, and adoption in South Africa has been very good. As I said, about twice the speed of what Windows 10 was at the time.
That's impressive. So is that adoption coming I mean, historically with Windows releases, the adoption has come in the consumer market first, the enthusiast market, and the corporate market has tended to follow later once they've done the necessary testing and they're absolutely 100% sure they want to deploy the software in the organization. Are we seeing a similar trend here, and is the corporate adoption starting to happen now?
100%. Look, compatibility is always a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And, as we moved from previous versions, Windows 7 to Windows 10, that gap was a bit bigger, right? Windows 10 to Windows 11, the gap was a lot smaller. So out-the-box compatibility was quite close in any case. I'd be lying if I mentioned stats here, but it was close to 99%. Look, we always say to our professional businesses out there, you got to do the testing, right? And I think you would agree. It's not just cold turkey and let's go. But one of the big changes that we made between Windows 10 and Windows 11, deliberately so, was that the management tools that you used for Windows 10 is the same management tools you use for Windows 11. So that really helped us in many ways and helped a lot of organizations adopt a lot quicker. And also from an IT point of view, the learning curve for IT and people doing this was a lot smaller. And as we talk about hybrid work, autopilot is a massive thing for us. We partner very closely with the likes of HP around that. So the ability to take a PC out the box, send it, or not even take it out the box, right? Send it directly to the end user sitting at home, them cracking it up, joining the internet and getting what they need has been incredible. I'll talk personal experience from Microsoft. I got a new PC. It wasn't HP, by the way, under lockdown. And IT didn't touch it. The PC came directly from the distributor to my house, opened this thing up, and sort of half an hour later, I was up and running.
Windows Auto updates are massively improved and better than, I would say, most other companies. Even other operating systems, I've not get something where the printer can be 19 foot sack old and Microsoft will find a driver. Somehow, somewhere, Microsoft even either made themselves a driver or they put it on there. So kudos to a lot of Microsoft dev guys sitting there in the back end making drivers, making sure stuff works.
Well, yes, you must have a lot of 19-foot sack printers that you've got to support.
So that's actually quite impressive for Microsoft to go that extended and say, sweet, let's make sure this works, because I can imagine how many people, old lady phoning Microsoft, my printer doesn't work, and now Microsoft somehow has to be the support agent for something that they didn't even sell.
Look, and that's the general feedback that we're getting. We talk about the universal print service that now exists as well. And the intent was to do exactly that. We talk about making it simpler, not even just in the design, but in the adoption, right? Crack this.
Keep to the plug and play principle.
So definitely. So the adoption, definitely, we're seeing great adoption.
Okay. So yes, let's bring you into the conversation here and talk a bit about HP. It's an organization that's been through significant change in the last few years. You've obviously, there was the demerger with HPE, or Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I believe you're both in the same building in Johannesburg.
We absolutely are. And yeah, it's happened, right? I think, for what is out of force of habit or for force of reference, it is two separate entities legally, right? There's Hewlett Packard Enterprise and HP. And I think we all kind of know HP, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, is talking to the server, the networking, storage, and of course every software-defined networking as an example. And of course then HP is focused on the end user. So if perhaps one way to kind of look at it is you've got the cloud and everything else on the enterprise side, and then you've got the edge computing, right, which talks about the PCs, the printers, and everything else that goes with it. So we do a lot more with the edge computing kind of things in HP, and that's where I fit in. And of course, then the other organization is literally a floor above us. You're right, Duncan. I mean, it's the world is a small space, and we've actually enjoyed being in close proximity, and it stayed that way.
But it must be quite interesting to have one entity that suddenly becomes two. Have you found the cultures have diverged somewhat? I mean, what is it like working at HP compared to, you don't work at HPE, but you're in the same building. How has HP changed since the demerger happened?
So I think we'll have all had to reinvent ourselves in some way or the other, and reinvent is a strong DNA portion of both organizations. I think we both have gone on our own journeys, but those journeys are really talking about reinventing, and I think we've all had to change it. In fact, the pandemic is kind of one of the things that made us realize a lot of the ways we saw things happen before is the way we need to change our strategies and move forward to adapt. And for me, I think the key one, and we've seen that at Microsoft as well, right, is that agility of being able to serve to how the market's moving and how we're changing. I think the culture stayed fairly intact. We're still very much seen as Fortune 500 with the emphasis of a startup company, in a sense that, let's look at what the customers are needing, what our customers need, our partner ecosystem, how do we address it, and can we be agile enough to also change? So we try not to remain static, and I think that's a good thing about both those companies, and I think that's probably the key. in a lot of instances these days. Yeah, to remain not static and be more dynamic.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go into more of a free-flowing discussion during this episode of the podcast. But before we get there, I'd like to just perhaps focus a little bit on this new research that you've done around the hybrid workforce and the impact it's having on the PC market more broadly. So it's, what is it called? It's called the Work Trend Index. Is that right?
Indeed. And in fact, this is the third time we're doing it. And we announced the results actually on the 22nd of September. So such our CEO made the announcement. I want to go back 3 years though, or 2 years when we did it for the first time and just show you the progression of what's actually come out. And South Africa was included in the survey, by the way. So we go back 2 years, and this really was just sort of a year into the pandemic. And the results were quite interesting. And we coined this phrase as the hybrid paradox. It was very, very interesting. About 70% of the audience actually said to us, you know what, we actually don't want to go back to work. It was quite interesting.
Surprise, you said low.
Surprise. And the reason for that was the flexibility. So the ability for me to take my kids to school, potentially, have lunch with a spouse or whatever it may be. But at the same time, almost the same amount of people said they miss the in-person collaboration with colleagues. And we called this thing, we coined this thing the hybrid paradox. Like, people want to stay at home, but they want to go back to work. They want to see people. So it was quite interesting. And the PC market at the time, we really started seeing that adoption of the endpoint, because people, that became the real endpoint where you were doing everything that you needed to do. It was very interesting. And we'll talk about form factor in a second, potentially. And then the second Work Trend Index came out, and there were 5 major things that were identified. But the thing that I'll really talk about is the worth it equation. And that's what came out of this, and we coined it as the worth it equation. And what people were saying is, that's great, let's go back to work, but make it worth it for me to go back to work. So I think about this, and you guys may have seen it at the time, but most people had better tech at home now, right? So most people had 2 screens at home potentially, may have had a mic set up or whatever it is. Great internet now, because I've now got great broadband at my house. Go back to the office, broadband's not so good.
Shared broadband.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe the canteen's not so good, because at home you were getting a good meal. You can make the canteen. So there was a large discussion around the worth it equation. Make it worth it for me to go back to work. Seeing colleagues, and there was even some new tech that was designed. We designed something called Outlook RSVP, because some people were going into work thinking their colleagues would be there in person, and they weren't. They were actually on a Teams meeting. So you had people. It was quite weird. And then the latest one that's just come out, which is quite interesting, we are now calling productivity paranoia, because there is paranoia in the system where people are now going, I don't know if people are really working at home. And the research is actually quite interesting to actually show us that people are, and the productivity numbers are quite good, whether they're at work or at home. So that's what's come out. I think when we talk about the PC market, I think it's quite evident that that whole hybrid work thing really drove people to use the endpoint a lot more than what they were prior to that, frankly. And that's why it's so important that security became such a big discussion, right? Because I had now opened up the edge in many ways. There was no more DMZs and firewalls as in the past.
Safety of your corporate network.
Didn't exist.
You don't have an IT admin sitting there at work saying, what is that guy doing there? What USBs is he plugging in?
That doesn't exist anymore, right? So very different discussion. So yes, I'd love to get your point of view, because we really saw the PC becoming very central.
I mean, it became so essential. I mean, it accelerated what was effectively the adoption of the PC in every environment. And you've got to look at it from a household environment. We saw it primarily in different segments, but now we started seeing shared PCs between persons in home. Mom would be using the machine for one, and then dad would probably be accessing it at the same point. And you needed to perhaps in some cases provide more than one device in that environment. So now you've got a mixed environment. You've got a home network that's kind of getting really strengthened up with a lot of other connectivity devices into it, and you're becoming a little bit more digital savvy and comfortable with it. In fact, you started seeing older generations and perhaps even kids adopting it a little quicker, because it was a survival technique. Now, what that's done overall is said, well, we've got to look a little bit closer at the form factor, right? Because it wasn't the way we had seen things before. So a lot of work and research, and we work closely with Microsoft and on a couple of levels. Firstly, it's the user experience, right? Of course, you've got to have a device that looks good, performs, and gets the business done. But now you need to fit different environments. And the hybrid world tells you it isn't just about fitting in an office or your study. It's going to be anywhere in between, and talks more about the places you can work from.
Yeah.
And so a lot of work has gone in. You talk about Windows 11, but at the same point, you talk about collaboration in that hybrid environment. A big function of that responsibility relies on us bringing that right technology of collaboration, because you want to be seen properly. You want to be heard properly. You want to be interacting with ease and not having, this audio not working and not having the flexibility to move from an in-ear, over-ear kind of environment. And I think that's brought us some nice, interesting discussions, because people want to play in different environments. And at the end of the day, you've got to take that major portion of it, is that security side, which Colin alluded to right now and started speaking about. And we've put a lot of effort into designing, into making a stronger security layered device, because we understand the environment isn't secure, that corporate network environment.
Unfortunately, the world isn't safe.
It isn't safe, and it isn't. Yeah,
you
we've
have
seen
to
that,
you do your best to make it as safe as possible.
absolutely.
Make as many walls as you can.
Correct.
Some-
And keep that productivity index
Yes,
right,
no,
because you don't want to make
without
it obtrusive.
making it so that the
Heavy,
that the consumer cannot use or gets a problem with the device. So it's like, I can't do this because this thing is blocking me or something like
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
So where do you guys see this going? Yesh, I mean, COVID is, touch wood, coming to an end. It seems to be over. People are starting to return to work. Certainly, I was sitting in traffic yesterday. Now, I was thinking, this pandemic
People are heading back to
is
office.
definitely over.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But do we continue with a sort of hybrid environment? What does HP do internally, for example? I mean, are you guys still working partly?
So
from
we're
home?
hybrid. We have both environments available, and I think, to be honest, and until we know what the workplace surveys, and sorry, Colin, I might have got the terminology wrong, but like the survey would be important to tell us, because I think let's be sure that we don't know that it's going to be either one environment or the other, but we know that hybrid exists in both environments, so we're doing both today. Hybrid means that you should have as much as good experience in the office as you would at home, right? Kind of matching the tech and returning back to a normal environment. And I think we'll keep that, quite honestly. Today, there's a lot more flexibility in an organization, talking to about the health of an employee, right? We can say a lot about the technology and how great it is, but that productivity index also brings a lot of stress to individuals, right?
Yeah.
People are working longer hours. They're taking a lot less time, for rests and breaks, etc. But the company policies are starting to evolve. They're starting to say, hey, hybrid, we've got to understand that some people will be remote, and remote can be anywhere. It could be at home, could be, part and parcel of being in a different location, different environment. You could be doing, whatever you need to do. But you've got to balance now, I think, more of the personal lifestyle and work into one. And that hybrid question is yet to be seen as a formulative definition. I think it's going to evolve over time. But the idea is just to obviously watch it and address as you see that coming along. Yeah,
I know Microsoft in the US has said certain things around remote work and working from the office, etc. Is that something they impose on a global basis, or does each operation decide, what works best in a particular market?
Look, I think very similar to Yesh. We're in a very similar situation locally. We also well aware of the culture, right? And what has happened, and allowing people to do their best work. And we need to take that into account. We also know that cultures have shifted, and that hiring, we spoke about the big resignation, that was the big buzzword a while ago. So we're also aware that people that are coming for interviews are also demanding things now, right? So does your work policy allow me to actually work a little bit from home, because that's where I do my best work potentially? So we need to take those things into account. When hybrid happened, we came out internally with a new operating model, and it's something that we share with our customers. We call it people, places, and processes, where people is now 100% at the center. So the well-being of the individual is critically important to us, because we know that people are now potentially dealing with a sick family member, and we need to give them that space, or we need to make sure that they are growing and learning in a hybrid environment. Back in the days, if you wanted to enable an employee, there was maybe a training program, whatever it is, and you eyeballed them and you saw them and you were in a room together.
Yes.
That's changed. The other thing to think about that has changed is building social capital. In the past, we used to go on team building. Let's all go on team building. Yeah, to Magaliesberg, we all did it. Everyone's together. Now we're hybrid. So how do you build social capital within a team environment where you are hybrid? We have seen that. And I think the people is the main element. The second one, places. This is where devices play a big role, because what we also need to do is we need to make sure that our offices and our places are kitted to do this. We talk about different technologies now that do that. HP has some amazing technology in that space that allows people to be their best they can within a room where half the people are online and half the people are in the room, as an example. And the important thing is not to ignore the people that are online. Now, what we saw prior to the pandemic, if you just think about it personally, is the people that were online were always excluded, right?
Yes.
You had this device on the table, and like every 5 minutes, the guy would be shouting, or the lady would be shouting, "Hey, remember me?" Now we sometimes see it's the opposite, right? The guys that are online having chat, and the guy that's sitting in the room is going, "Hang on." So we need to think about these things. The culture, making sure that we are inclusive, and that's where things like and Yesh mentioned it, the quality of the speakers.
Super important.
Super
right?
important.
Yeah.
The quality of the camera.
Yeah, camera quality has drastically improved.
Right?
The
Absolutely,
laptops now all of a sudden.
Super important. So when we talk about places, we've got to think about the technology that's enabling this as well. And the last bit is obviously processes. You can't have a paper process anymore for people to sign because they might be at the house or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the digitalization angle of that is huge, right? I think a lot of companies had to look internally and say, how does that digitizing work? And collaborative tools that you have, and Teams is one that I'm familiar with quite extensively, gives you a lot of that bandwidth to be able to manage a lot of that processes digitally, and that talks to productivity and efficiency again. And I think there are the tools available. I think it's really just about understanding that the world is slightly different now.
Yeah.
How do you encompass that better? You've got to agree, they're going to spend a lot more time in front of that machine, hey?
Yeah. How has that changed customer? I mean, a lot of businesses obviously buying PCs for their employees working at home, but both end user, consumer, retail consumers, and business buyers. What have you seen in terms of what the questions they're asking you in terms of what they need for this hybrid work environment? But they must be having conversations like, what's the camera quality like? What's the audio quality like? What are some of the other conversations you're having with clients?
What's the one big one that I think that really came out of it was, we talk about the enterprise side of it, was really just about the pressure that it brought around to the IT and the support and services side of that. I think that was a really, really unseen challenge because, like Colin was saying, right, you get your machine shipped, you don't have the IT desk, like you were mentioning here. Like, you can't go there and say, I've got a problem here, or can you just maybe image it, and can you do this kind of... And I think that was a very, very much a big, let's say, challenge overall for a lot of organizations. How do we do this remotely? And we've spent a lot of time building a lot of solutions, and we've really increased our services stack, number one. How do we provide better AI into our devices that give the guys pre-alerts as opposed to having to fix issues? Because you're not in the office and in a 5-minute radius. You're going to be in different environments. We want to use a lot more capabilities within our devices to say, hey, listen, you can have or what do you call it, distributed management kind of tools. What are those tools available between the HP stack, and what can you do together with Microsoft in that sense of bringing that to the IT? Because you really want to make it as seamless for the individual to feel that there is a lot of things can be fixed. We've done a lot of that in printing side as well, right? We understand that you can't actually go out to the site environment for our customers and fix it. So we've deployed a lot of analytics and software capability at the back end to be able to spot, fix, and remotely control and correct issues, which has saved actually a lot of time and also improved productivity indexes overall. And I think that was one big key nugget.
Duncan, a big one that we were starting to see is battery life. Questions around battery life, because I'm now going to be moving between coffee shops potentially.
And load shedding.
And load shedding,
Right?
potentially. So we saw a lot of questions around battery life. In the education space, a lot of questions around, and once again, comes back to speakers and that, but the ability to narrate. Especially for students, not having to type, the ability to narrate, and for the hardware and Windows 11 together to work together to actually do that speech to text. And for those that haven't tried under Windows 11 on an HP machine, absolutely phenomenal. And those were some of the major changes that were made. And also pen input now. So we're seeing a lot of it around dictation and where I am. And you talk about automating those processes, people needing to sign. Digital signatures. So some very, very interesting asks coming out around hardware and capabilities.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. All right. So, yes, let's talk a bit about HP's PC lineup. And Gerard, feel free to jump in at any time with questions here. But maybe just at a very high level, take us through what you have in the market and who it's aimed at. And let's talk about some of the cool tech you've got.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done a lot in terms of our redesign. I think, we talk about serving just certain markets. Firstly, you've got the commercial and the corporate environment, right? And you've always got a lineup in here. We talk about quite a nice range of products. The Elite Book is generally the product line that we're pushing it into the corporate environment, and we've seen a lot of development. Now, it's not just about having just the processing power and the powerhouse behind it and some of the manageability features and security features. They're also looking for devices that actually are thinner, lighter, much more deployable. So when you look at the traditional enterprise, or let's say the corporate kind of machine, it's very much taken an image look of a consumer machine, which would be sleeker, funkier kind of environment. And then on the consumer side, it's also improved drastically, right? You've seen this big shift from working remotely where you've got a nice gaming demand coming along. We've seen gaming become a really, really important aspect of it. But not to say that at the end of the environment, the ZBook and the workstation environment is really important. We've seen a lot more push towards notebooks. I think, working remotely and having also the power issues also drives a lot more interest towards mobile or let's say notebook kind of form factors. Yeah. So we've seen that grow quite well. So, we've got the range on consumer, whether that is, from the Pavilion or moving on to the Victus and the Omen range for gaming. And of course, we still have desktop machines, don't get me wrong. I think that exists and that's a strong tangent of it. But we've done a lot more work in terms of making those machines, at least on the mobile platform, a lot more strong in our portfolio. Now, what's nice about it also is that it's not just about the technology you're bringing onto it, but it's about how you're doing responsible design and responsible manufacturing. And we've spent a lot more effort in the new lineups. And if it's not seen on a product spreadsheet or on a box, know that we're using a lot more responsible, sustainable motions in terms of using recycled plastic materials, and of course important on the packaging side. So when you look at the way we're designing our machines, we're taking a lot more responsible method in the way we're doing it, but still bringing the cool tech and the availability out there. And then outside just the general laptop environment, there's also, the other products that we have, which is retail point of sale. And we've done some amazing stuff on that. And if you haven't seen them, we'll certainly get an opportunity to show you some of that, because the traditional way of looking at retail storefronts, we've done a lot of work there. But it's not just about the storefronts in retail. It's also about the medical segment. It's also about the logistics environment. Today, if you look at some of the challenges we've had in COVID, where you had, remote testing stations, etc., you need pretty robust, pretty secure, strong devices that have the capability to be able to collect patient information data. And you're not going to do it off just any generic tablet. So we've put a lot of effort in developing the retail point of sale to be multi-industry applicable, right? Yes. And I think that's, that's the other unheard hero within the portfolio, actually.
For us. Logistics and so forth, because imagine everything was now shipped, delivered. Nobody can go from house. All the amount, imagine how many, Pick and Pay and all those companies needing their own courier companies, and the scooter guys, they all need to have machines, and all of that data needs to go around that customer.
Correct,
you have to place with your phone, place the order, get it through. All of that people need to do it, but it's all machine based because it's all barcodes, serial numbers.
Yeah, because you're scanning and collecting, and you want to digitize as quickly as you can.
And you need to make sure what goes with the right thing, so you don't send the customer one parcel wrong customer and stuff like that.
Now, you raise an interesting point, and this is a major change we've also started to see in the market, is what we would call the frontline worker, right?
Yeah.
2/3 of the global workforce are frontline workers. And I think this became, and if you think about technology deployment to those people, very slim prior to the pandemic, potentially. And it's interesting, right? Because the frontline worker is, in many respects, the representative of your brand. It's the first person that you see when you walk into a storefront, or a logistics person dropping something off. So the one thing we have seen, and goes nicely with the device lineup, is a new thought about how we actually equip that frontline worker with technology to allow them to have access to data, and allow them to actually represent your brand correctly.
That's one big difference I've seen with laptops. As well now with laptops, when we get to laptops now, especially now with both AMD and Intel being more aggressive with processors and so forth, processors have gone way better now from what we used to. We now have new 12th gen laptops, 13th gen coming out next year, even from the AMD side. I've had customers buy new, even from the Elite Book and Pro Books, where they come with a big batteries, 90 watt hour batteries and so forth. Exactly. And then it's the first time I've had people come and say, I can actually get about 10-hour battery life on this. That's how much, with the new processors have improved the battery efficiency, you can actually get that now.
Correct.
And you can do it, and you can use Excel, you've got PowerPoint open at the same time. So all of those features, and then with Windows also becoming more intelligent with Edge and so forth, with Edge sleeping tabs properly and so forth. So you can save all that little...
Everything makes a difference.
Every little watt you can save makes that reach, because I've had one doctor, he can now actually do a flight from here all the way to UAE. On one charge.
On one charge, yeah. And that's what we're looking for. And you raise an important one, like when you look at the AMD and the Intel environment, right? I think, generally, it was... when you talk about the users, they kind of felt like at certain level, I've got a machine and it can do X, Y, and Z, and I didn't need to look any further. Now they're a lot more aware, they're a lot more cognizant of the details behind it. They're asking tougher questions. They're looking for better feedback, right? Like on what is that utilization? What does that battery look like?
More my customers go like, what? How much? If I will do work, how much battery can I get out of it?
Exactly.
So it's like battery life comes first. Then it's okay. What webcam? Normally, no customer before COVID. No one asked about the webcam.
Correct.
It's like that was not even a thought. Now they go, okay, battery, webcam, speaker.
Amazing.
I'm like, well, okay, that's changed everything a bit.
ESCOM has definitely contributed to that.
Yes, I presume that has added a lot to it as well.
But you're right. Customers used to walk into a retail store. They'd say, "Oh, this thing is so thin. Look how thin it is."
Yes.
They don't even think that's thin because the battery's not that great.
Or they just goes like, oh, it's an i7. Oh, that's the best. Just buy that. And they don't even look at the rest of the stuff. So there's like, and it actually makes a point where you can actually, people can now appreciate when a company actually goes and does a lot of effort in their laptops.
Yeah, absolutely.
How they make the chassis, what metal quality.
Correct.
So it's like taking that stuff now from Apple and so forth, and then saying, sweet, you can buy a Windows machine that's, in my opinion, I would never go Mac. So I thought we were straight. You can buy a PC that's, in my opinion, better. That you can use.
Now, the other thing we're starting to see in the commercial side from that point of view is, we've always spoken about TPMs and vPros.
Yes, exactly.
Like we're starting to see that become a big discussion.
Yeah.
Big
TPM especially.
TPM, especially because of Windows 11. And the reason for that is we wanted people to have the best, most secure experience. But there's even some interesting innovation going on there from a chip point of view. And it's related to security once again.
Yeah.
We know, for instance, we now have a TPM module on the motherboard, and we have a CPU that sits next to it, and they've made that bus transfer a lot smaller so that you don't have rootkit attacks. But there's some interesting work going on, and we'll see that very shortly. I know HP is very involved in this, called Pluton, where they're actually now taking that TPM and putting it on the CPU, so that there's no longer any bus transfer. So there's, the problem is the clever guys and these clever actors. I mean, these guys are clever. They're already looking at a hardware level going, hang on, how do I get in there before that OS boots, as an example. So, by doing that, the TPM is now on the CPU. You no longer have that opportunity. So, man, we're seeing some very interesting innovation, even from a chip point of view when it comes to...
well, that adds, because Proton is now added onto the AMD's 7000 series desktop chips that have just been launched in South Africa. So those ones already, with partnership with Microsoft, already has that built in. As far as I know, AMD will have the new laptop chips coming out Q1 next year. Will also have those things built in from Microsoft, which adds a lot to security, and it's actually quite impressive what you can do to mitigate so forth. Because I know AMD even had to go to extent where they had to put an ARM chip on there to actually to do type of stuff that Proton's doing now. But now that there's an actual infrastructure from Microsoft side where they can just use all of that knowledge there already, and then the operating system can actually understand it and do all of that things in the back end, that the customer doesn't need to worry about it. Windows Defender will pop up and says, I've blocked this thing.
There you go.
Super not legit. And I've had a couple of customers where that actually protected them for ransomware and so forth.
Isn't that like the whole idea? Is like almost it needs to be transparent.
Yeah.
And almost like on the user side, you don't actually have to know that this is happening, but you want to be sure that it is there.
It's there. It should be there. It's the invisible man there making sure you are safe.
Safe, absolutely. That's and on multi-levels, OS level, hardware level, boot.
Look, and the other thing you've got to talk about when you talk about that now is zero trust, right? Going back to the commercial side, because everyone's now talking zero trust. Yes. Some people call it zero trust, other people call it something else. But at the end of the day, we start looking at, how do you operate in an environment, and this is where the hardware becomes so important as well. How do we operate in an environment, one where we explicitly want to authenticate you, right?
Yes.
And what is very interesting now, Duncan, if you think about it, MFA, multi-factor authentication, this was always a corporate thing. Man, it's everywhere now. Even in the consumer space, right?
Absolutely.
So that's good, because, we're verifying you explicitly, however we're doing that. The second thing that we're now starting to do is only giving you access to what you need when you need it, without interrupting productivity, because that's critically important. And then always assuming that you're working under a breach environment, right? Now, the reason why I bring up the hardware there is what Windows 11 really supports are things like Windows Hello, passwordless security. Because that's really where things become really robust and very secure. And I mean, some of these devices, if you look at the HP stuff, all now supported. Windows Hello, either facial recognition or biometric or whatever it may be. And that is critical to the Windows 11 and to the Zero Trust story.
And do credit to Microsoft as well, through, because you've got your mobile app as well for the security and so forth. I use that a lot now.
Authenticator.
I tell people the Authenticator app is like brilliant, because if I log into a machine that I've never logged into before, or a new machine, it pings my phone, gives you like, here's 2 numbers, does it match? Yes, is it you? Okay, there we go, press in and there you go. You don't have to press buttons, you don't have to passwords, you don't have to get a password manager out or anything like that. And that Microsoft, kudos to you guys to make that actually work well, because I must say, from all the other stuff I've used, no one, even customers, because we do that now. We kind of do this for my stuff because we in retail, so we do Office 365. We install that for customers when they come in. So when they buy a new laptop, we set that up, because we do get a lot of older customers coming in as well. And then we set that and actually set up all of those actual double authentication and all those things for them, because we know they're more likely to be caught by that, because they tend not to be, their password is fish 123, something like that. It's like, or like password. There's still some of them use password and so forth. So then we migrate all of them to that. Or if they've got a Gmail account, we link that in, but then use the Microsoft Authenticator, because it's just, we've had a couple of customers get hacked as well already, and then lost money.
Right, absolutely.
Like that's
absolutely.
how you need to be more. You need to have that paranoia and say, make sure the customer is actually doing the right thing. Are they actually putting their password in the right place and so forth? Because Microsoft already has protections against that now for Windows 11 as well. It can actually see if you put your password in and they know it's something somewhere where it's super legit. Then they go nope.
I would genuinely say to people, like look at the PC that you have. Most of the PCs have got that technology. Turn it on.
Absolutely.
That's why I like to a lot of negative that people brought out. The fact that Microsoft said, let's set this as a standard. I've got a feeling, because we had a previous show that I also said that Microsoft and a lot of people got a bit hard slack against that. In my opinion, that was a bit wrong. So a lot of people say, oh, no, I should buy a new machine. Ooh, it's this.
You're talking about the TPM?
Yeah, TPM. It's like, oh, it's a conspiracy between HP and Dell and all these companies to get people to buy new laptops. It's like, no, but you can't keep up using like 10-year-old laptop.
No,
and we still get people bring laptops there. I'm not joking you. Second gen, first gen i7s from HP and stuff like that. And you still look like, holy crap, this thing, especially some of the HP
it
Pro
hasn't
books.
failed, which is good, but at the same point,
okay,
you know,
at some point, you need to replace
You
it. Like
need to,
this
you
HP
need
Pro
to.
books, especially because you can see they've been bashed and broken, but they've been built like a brick.
Yeah.
So, but it's like, it's now time to move on, because those things don't have the hardware to protect you again.
To protect you, absolutely. And it's a tough one, right? Because you really want to be at the same point, be on the forefront of technology. I mean, we're an early adopter nation, let's be honest, right? We want to try everything new as quickly as we can. And sometimes early adopter isn't just about having the fancy, the glittery, and, you know, the shiny and flashy kind of product. It's really just about our necessity. We live in a difficult world today. I mean, the world isn't a safe world. And once you're online and you spend that amount of online, I mean, you are in a global environment. It's as simple as that. And you're opening yourselves to all of those threats and all of those risks. And yes, sometimes, you know, necessity asks that we do understand, because you're right, the older product, after a long time, there is only so much you can squeeze out of that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be otherwise a risk in your environment. And we don't force people to buy new machines regularly, Duncan. We just, it's important to keep up with the trend and expect, you know, what is my minimum level.
The fact that you can still install Windows 10 on that machine from
is
first
also
gen
that's
Intel
great.
from
That's great.
So basically, that's from Dell, from HP and so forth, having support, working with Microsoft,
absolutely.
getting that support, making sure Windows 10 still works with those old devices.
Yeah.
Now, I must say, I've had a couple of customers where once they get used to touchscreens,
they can't go back,
this
right?
is also a big thing against that. Like people had riots. Windows 8 touchscreen, man. And it's like this ugly thing. It's like, have you actually used it? No, it's stupid. I'm like, okay, wait. And then now when Windows 10 came out, and now with Windows 11 that has better pen utilization and touch and so forth. I've had doctors come and it's like, why haven't I switched 10 years ago? I'm like, I kind of told you 2 years ago you need to switch. And then as I get the doctors to switch over, they're like, nah, I'm sold. This 360 thing now, I'm like, I'm gone, dude.
So the question is, if a doctor is using e-inking, is it still illegible on the screen?
Yes, then you'll use Microsoft OCR there for the poor patient to see what it's actually saying.
That would have to be pretty damn good OCR software.
Maybe you need to test that.
But it's been pretty good, because the OCR software that some of my doctors have used, and they say it is actually pretty good, actually. So some people, it's like, do yourself a favor, it's like, play with it. If you've got a touch screen, play with the OCR with Windows 10. It actually works, and the dictation, because we do sell to we sell to a couple of schools for the blind and so forth, and all of their machines are also Windows 10 or Windows 11. And the fact that Microsoft spends so much time and money in accessibility.
Well, let me give you a practical example of sometimes how we just don't think from an accessibility point of view. And Windows 11 has that built in. If you think about somebody who's hard of seeing who might be blind, and they boot that PC up, and there's something wrong before the OS loads, they actually can't
Decipher
solve the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Narrator, as an example, actually boots up prior to the operating system coming alive. So you now have the ability to actually read the lock screen or read potential errors before you know. These are small things, but they're big things.
They make big differences.
It's something that able people will never think about and be completely like, oh, that's not, why are you doing that? I'm like, you need to do it because there is people there that will find that beneficial.
True. It was the same as the updates that we made now in Windows 11, adding more natural narration voices. Because if you think about now a screen reader reading hours worth of content, it actually can become quite annoying, frankly, if the voice is not, and you will drift, right?
Yeah.
And simple things like adding more natural voice makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Now it's that I think that market still needs to get in because I know some of the lawyer firms are looking at to do that because they do. I must say they use a lot of like the old Dragon software because Microsoft owns them and so forth, and a lot of them are starting to get used to the Microsoft implementation because they use their PC as a secretary. Like I'm not joking. Like literally, they don't have a secretary. Their PC is the secretary. So it goes PC, make note, do this, make this note for this call. I need to find this thing, and then they start dictating. Then because it's lawyers, they do documents and documents. So they walk in the actual office and then talk and talk and talk, and then you'll be amazed how well. Then again, you need to have a proper microphone on that machine.
Correct.
So a lot of them go. It's like oh, I need to have a proper microphone. Oh, why is it struggling? I'm like, it's the microphone.
Yeah,
your microphone is crap, mate. It's struggling to hear you when you walk away from the PC because the PC doesn't know
it
you're
just like
walking away
loses
from
you
it.
and you're gone. Absolutely.
So then it's like oh, okay, that's why it was struggling. I'm like, yes, okay, now it's
exactly.
So then you get that in, so that a lot of people still need to start learning, buying a new machine, seeing what you can now get out of it from Windows 11 and the form factors that they provide is such a
There's
major
such a
eye-opening.
refinement done, eh?
Yes.
It really is. You're missing so much of the cool features if you're not
Exactly.
taking
That's what
leap
people like.
forward,
Sometimes I sit with the customers like, you're getting this new laptop. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this in Office and so forth? Oh crap! I didn't even thought about that. I never seen that actually. Like people can actually use it. And it's like, oh, I actually never knew. And like, yeah, you can do that with your laptop and the sleep thing. It's like, oh, do I need to shut down my machine? It's like, no, if there's an SSD and it just close the lid. It's like this shutdown story should now end now.
Anyway, I want to change subject now. I want to talk a bit about. We spoke about logistics earlier, but I want to talk about logistics and the supply chain in the PC industry specifically. We know it's been a big story through COVID of demand, particularly in semiconductors. We know that automotive manufacturers just haven't been able to and their lines have been literally shut down because they can't get enough chips. Right. Are we starting to see the end of this dire shortage of silicon? And how has it impacted HP and the supply of computers into the South African market?
I mean, it's such a relevant question for now because I think there was not a manufacturing company that didn't suffer from this challenge, right? I mean, you've got to know that the COVID just brought about this accelerated demand. Supply just couldn't keep up. And it was not just, on the PC side, it was the car manufacturers and everybody else. I think we all know the story on there. And of course, that put a lot of pressure, not just on the manufacturing and the component kind of supply, but also logistics and every other downscale industry that it went into. So are we seeing that improving? I'm going to say absolutely yes. I think we've come around, and we've learned a lot of lessons in terms of how do we efficientize processes within an organization? How do we find better ways of creating better routes, or for that matter, having more supplies and different ones, quite honestly. But at the end of the day, it takes a while to ramp a lot of that up. And I think that the world, as it moves forward, we talk a lot of things that are going on when we talk about the buildings are starting to become more smart and IoT devices coming in. There's a lot of pressure still, right, in the market to get a lot more chips out of it, and a lot of silicon done in electric cars, like you mentioned. They'll drive a big demand as well in the market going forward. So I think let's not assume it's going to return to normal. I think we just got to adapt to a very tough situation, but we're getting a lot better at it. And I think that's one key message, is that we're getting a lot better at it, and we're finding better ways of harmonizing, whether that is efficientizing and I don't know if that's a real word or not, but I mean finding the efficiency in the design of the product. Exactly. Because it's a process. Just as soon as you finish and you find more efficient ways of designing your device, and then, we can actually open up and find better ways of making that. So, using more common parts, using less of one, and trying to create the platforms is a lot of work on the back end that we're doing. And so for the first part of it, it's like to say, well, there's ways you can improve to address that supply demand. And that is something I think will stay, quite honestly, because more people are getting more comfortable with devices. The good news for us, I think, overall, is tech is becoming a part of the household, not just on the device you're using as a machine. It's the fridges, the TVs, all of the equipment, the vacuum cleaners. They're all waking up and they're connecting to the internet, and that's kind of in some ways exciting. But of course, it's just where the world's going, and it's great to be part of that, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's like we're seeing a lot of that tech coming into the environment. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. Hewlett and I spoke on the show about the silicon supply issues, and what we've seen in the GPU market in the last few months. Our prices have literally just crashed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it almost seems to me that the high end silicon is now in ample supply again. So if you're looking for a microprocessor for your PC, or you're looking for a chip for your
like
phone.
the Intel guys, the AMD guys,
But
the
the
NVIDIA guys, they kind of good.
But the automotive guys are still suffering because they're using the older tech, which is not being
not
produced
as ubiquitous. Or the manufacturing companies have just told them, it's time to grow up now. You need to use the new stuff now, boys.
Absolutely.
I'm like,
So if you're looking for a PC now, you can get it.
it is easier. But it's now,
Absolutely,
there's other things now with PCs that people don't think about. It's because a laptop is not just the laptop. The laptop is the screen, the hinges, the body parts,
Several
the keyboards,
different
the lights behind the keyboard. It's a trackpad, it's the speakers, it's the webcam. And it only takes one of those manufacturers need a component that they can't get that then affects the whole lineup. And it won't just affect one company, it affects all of them. Because there's probably just, I can't imagine there's 100,000 different companies that make hinges. There's probably maybe 10 or 5.
Right.
So each company has their own unique design.
Correct.
So even then, now you as a company from HP now needs to negotiate. It's like, these are our hinges. We need to make sure we get our hinges on time because we need to put them on our laptops. So a lot of that shortage, when we saw that shortage and the ramp up was there, they placed the orders, but then it's like, you can only place so many orders when the manufacturer just says, oh, we can't make more. And it's like, then it's like, so people unfairly, I think, got a bit upset. It was like, oh, why can't you just make more? It's like, well, there's not. It's same as a car. You need wheels for the car to wheel. You need a steering wheel. You can't sell the car without a steering wheel.
Absolutely.
So same with
there's a lot of lessons.
I know some manufacturers who might like to sell that as a value-added option.
maybe it's an option that we'll go into the software where it's a DLC that you now buy separately.
Of course.
But I think a lot of companies learned a lot of lessons, and also I'm actually quite surprised that the actual quality of products didn't suffer.
Well, I think that's a very important one. Yeah, it was not a matter of like you could get some, like you said, if you wanted a hinge, you could get a hinge, but you didn't want to trade off one thing, right? Because I think the brands of what our responsibility is, and we look at tier one brands such as yourselves, like you don't take shortcuts when it comes to quality. You make sure that you go through the same robust, because people have invested a lot of their time, a lot of their money into actually buying a device that will last for them. But at the same time, your responsibility, not only to the environment, but also to the person and the experience, right? From form, functionality, and design, needs to be kept at a certain layer. And you can't take shortcuts in an environment, because once you do that, you probably risk reputational damage, right? And that's very hard.
I know some
to come back
companies
from,
have, because I know some of the more Chinese companies, they change some components on their like SSDs and so forth.
I won't comment on that.
But again, there's a purely Chinese companies. So that's why I tell people, it's like, I can't say that the hinges were poor before COVID and after COVID. That's still the same quality. I can't say the laptops have broken more than what they did previously. So I tell people, in the companies that we sell mostly, I can't really say that they've actually somehow managed to still keep the quality, even though the demand was so much higher. And there was always, you can imagine the enticement, like, we can buy it from this cheaper guy for that, but we can use this.
Shortcuts.
It's like, you see, and it's like, no, but then if the thing breaks, then the guy's going to say, that's crap HP, I'm going to buy something else. And it's like, you see now,
you just got to protect the brand, I think, at all of this stuff.
So I think I'm actually quite impressed that most of the brands and companies actually hold their temptation and didn't just go that deep. Because a lot of them could, and I can honestly say none of them actually, everyone did well. Everyone did well with COVID. So everybody sold everything they made. So everybody was pretty happy. I think the hangover is coming now a bit.
Sure.
So we'll probably see a bit of a slowdown now with laptops. I think you can only sell so many laptops until people are going to stop buying laptops. So we're probably going to see that. And then that will, I hope that will now push a pioneering of saying, okay, sweet, we've now sold these things. Let's start making different things again, because I had this fear where you could start seeing laptops being same. But the companies try to make themselves like, Envy has their specific look, But then to see how they're going to grow that now differently when the market has a bit of more saturation. Now you can experiment again.
Yes, exactly.
Because before COVID, you could see drastic designs. The Dell design and the HP design looked completely different.
Yeah,
And then it's like, the HP design has this nice feature because they had nice, like, especially the Envies and so forth. They had those thin designs and so forth.
They kept
that
that.
pioneered. And then the vapor chambers that they started using for cooling and so forth. That's also one thing that a lot of people don't think about laptops. Is like all the cooling that goes, engineering time that you spend.
Absolutely. The thinner, the tighter you make it, the more, you've got to put a lot more.
You need to now get engineer guys to make batteries smaller or get the more expensive batteries in the smaller size, get better thermal, get the better fans, and that costs money.
It does.
It's not just there.
Guys, we are almost out of time, but before we wrap today, I want to put you both on the spot because I want to ask you maybe to look into your crystal balls. Let's look forward 5 years. There's been amazing change over the last 3 years. A lot of it caused by the pandemic, and I'm going to circle this back to the discussion on hybrid work. We've got companies now talking about this thing called the metaverse. I'm not quite sure what that is yet. I'm sure people will figure it out in the coming years. But there's this idea that we're going to be meeting virtually. That at some point in the future, a Teams meeting is going to morph into something where your colleague who's working from home will actually seem like they're in the space with you. Colin, where do you see this hybrid work environment going, and what's technology actually going to do? Let's say, I won't ask you 10 years from now because that's probably too difficult. But let's say 5 years from now. I mean, how is it going to change? Am I literally going to be sitting next to a virtual version of you having a similar conversation to the one we're having now?
Well, look, I wish I had that crystal ball because I would do some interesting investments maybe. Look, I think this new productivity paranoia is quite interesting now if you look at it. So I think we're going to start settling down a bit potentially from a hybrid work point of view. And I think, I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were, but I think there will be a new rhythm that gets established. I think tech is going to accelerate quite drastically into the next couple of years because we now have a lot of the tech that we've been waiting for quite some time, right? I know Moore's Law and all the rest of those lovely things, but I think that is accelerating now. If you have a look at things like 5G, no conspiracy theories here, but if you have a look at 5G, I mean, that is now starting to become quite pervasive. And I think that's going to change a lot of what we do potentially. Now, everything's going to, you spoke about it, everything might have a embedded SIM in it now, right? Which means that things are going to change. I do think that the metaverse is going to be quite big for us. And as we settle down into hybrid work, I do think we are going to see a lot more of that. So potential avatars representing you in a meeting. So if I were to predict that, I think we're going to see a fairly good acceleration of that tech. I think we're going to see a lot around sustainability because I think we have to. I think just as brands, we have to start being a lot more cognizant of sustainability. Whether it's PC, whether it's cloud services or whatever it is. But I think that tech's going to accelerate what we're going to see in the next couple of years.
And of course, Microsoft has HoloLens. Another cool tech that's potentially going to take us into this future.
Yeah, I mean, I saw I was speaking to chief marketing officers yesterday, and they're even going, well, what does it look like for us in the future? If you look at a chief marketing officer, we were all about FMCG and putting up that billboard and the lovely TV ad, but now think about this: if everything's connected in the next 3 to 4 years' time, and we now have embedded SIMs and we have 5G in these everything becomes marketable, right? So even that, I think, is drastically going to change. The one thing I would say, to people, and we need to keep reinventing ourselves, right? We need to be curious about this stuff. We need to reinvent ourselves, what we do on a daily basis, whether you're in marketing or whether you're in IT or whatever it is. I think that for me is key.
Yesh,
on my side, again, crystal ball, who knows? I mean, some things you can see and some things you don't. But, if I had to look at it, let's take a step back. I think for a long time we told a lot of people at the end of the day, the computer is an essential part of your ecosystem. And wasn't necessarily adopted until a seismic change comes and makes that a reality. And suddenly you realize, well, I don't know how I did without it. I think we're going to start seeing something similar with the AR and VR kind of view. I think 5 years back, if I remember, we put a lot of investment, and we still do, right, into AR and VR, like the VR backpack, a PC on your back with the ability for you to connect in a 3D spatial environment. I think there are some limitations on a 2D platform, like in an environment that you're working today. And if the technology supports that, why not? But I think when in that sense, you've also seen some major changes on the way workplace and workforce distribution is happening today. Companies are talking to people that work in multiple locations across multiple borders. You know, I mean, these environments create so much of static capability, and you could only do so much via PC, and you want to be able to be more immersive. Colin spoke about it earlier, you know, the team building. What does that do for the social side of things? I think with those stimulations and those frustrations, but also the need for that, it'll accelerate the AR, VR, and then I think, you know, you'll start seeing more reality. I think the tech is there, and I think we're not afraid to embrace it. And I think you're right. Maybe in the next 5 years, we'll see a lot more of that coming out, because at some point, it'll turn to productivity and it'll to social improvement. And that's going to be a great thing, right, at the end of the day for us as organizations.
Excellent. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation.
Yes.
I really appreciate you both coming into the studio, and thank both Microsoft and HP for supporting everything PC. It's a labor of love for Gerard and myself, and I think our audience is also very appreciative of your involvement in this production. So thank you very much. Yesh, Surjoodeen.
There you go.
No, I definitely mispronounced it this time. You're very kind to say I
Yes,
didn't.
Surjoodeen. There we go.
Surjoodeen, there we go. Yesh
Yeah.
Surjoodeen is MD at HP South Africa and Microsoft. Beg your pardon, your name isn't Microsoft, your name is Colin. Colin Erasmus is Chief Operating Officer of Microsoft South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us on Everything
Absolute
PC.
pleasure.
Gentlemen.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Gerard. Thank you very much, Duncan.
Sweet.